Hello, guys. Good afternoon. My name is Yanni Gale, and I'll be your English teacher today. So, today we're going to check the passive voice. Who likes the passive voice? Well, usually students don't like the passive voice, but don't worry, I'm going to make it super, super, super easy for you. Okay? So, let's dive into this. When and why do we use the passive voice? Well, we use the passive voice when we want to write formal, so scientific papers. Let's say at school, you have to do an investigation or you have to do research, then we usually use the passive voice. When you're talking about general opinion, okay, so let's say people say, or in the past, people believe, no? So instead of saying, okay, the news was given by people, it's not so important. It's not a proper noun. So for public opinions, we're going to use the passive voice as well. So we remove whoever is the subject or whoever is doing the action. We remove them from the sentence completely. We also use the passive voice when the object is more important, okay, than whoever is doing the action, okay? Another reason why we use it is, for example, if a person is reporting the news or a crime scene, then they tend to use the passive voice because guess what? Most of the time they don't know who is the perpetrator or who actually committed the crime. So they have to use the passive voice because remember, you don't want to get into trouble. You don't want to say things that are not true. So we opt for the passive voice because we eliminate the doer. The doer is usually the subject, but just for you to understand, we remove the doer, whoever is doing the action, completely from the sentence, and we focus on what is receiving the action. Okay, so those are some of the reasons why we tend to use the passive voice. The structure. Okay, what is this passive voice and how do we construct it? How do we create passive voice? Let's get on to it. Well, first of all, we need the verb to be. The verb to be is going to function as our auxiliary in the sentence, but the principal verb is going to be our past participle. Okay, Yanni, so where do we get the principal verb? Okay, in order to use the passive voice, we have to have an idea, okay, of what we want to say or what we want to write. And what does that mean for us? Okay, let's say you're going to think, we usually think in the active voice, okay? So you know what you want to say, and then based on that idea, we're going to change it now to the passive voice. Don't worry, I know it's getting a little bit tricky, but you're gonna see what I'm talking about on the next slide. Okay, let me just move this a little bit. So for example, John writes a book. If I were to ask you, who is doing the action? Who is the doer? Okay, you would say it's John. That is very correct. What is John doing? Well, he writes a book. Okay, who is receiving the action or what in this case is receiving the action? It's a book. Okay, so here we can quickly identify the subject is the doer, writes is the verb or the action, a book is our object. Okay, are we clear? Okay, awesome. I think we're getting there. So what are we going to do now? Remember at the beginning I told you that with the passive voice, we focus mainly on who is receiving the action. So we're going to focus on this little thing right here, which is called the object, okay? The thing that is receiving the action. So once you've identified that, that now becomes the subject of our sentence. What do I mean? Just put it at the beginning of the sentence and everything will be okay. So now we put it at the beginning of the sentence and we say, a book. But okay, the verb to be. Remember I told you that we need the verb to be, sorry, plus the past participle. Well, since writes is in the present tense, that is telling us that our verb to be has to be in the present tense. And since a book is singular, then we have to use is, okay? So a book is. And what is the past participle of write? The verb to write. Well, it's written, okay? So a book is written. Most of the cases we stop the sentence right here, okay, in the passive voice. But remember, when you're using a proper noun, that is the name of a person, an organization, an institution, etc. Those are proper nouns. you can include it in your passive voice. So a book is written, and we say by whom? By John. Okay, get it? Don't worry, we're going to see. One thing I want to outline is that in the active voice, we have a whole list of tenses: present, past, present perfect, past perfect, future. All of those, we can also put them in the passive voice in English. Don't worry, I will show you. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so here I have a list of examples, the same one that we just used, okay, for it to be easier for you to recognize the differences, okay? And here, if you notice, I have the structures highlighted. So this is how we're going to change the verbs depending on what our active voice is and the tense that it is in, okay? So as we did in the first example, John writes a book. A book is written by John, okay? Now with the present continuous, John is writing a book. A book is being, okay? I know it's funny, it's tricky. English is tricky at times. But here's the thing. Here we're using double to be. So we're still using the to be to indicate that it is the present, in this case, present continuous. But we need the ing, the ing form in English to indicate that it is progressive, it is continuous. The same thing here. So we need being, and then the main verb again in the past participle. Don't get confused. You're going to get it. Don't worry. Practice makes perfect. So a book is being written by John. Now with the past tense. John wrote a book. A book was very easy, right? Because we're talking about the past. So we have to put the verb to be in the past tense. John, a book was written by John. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The past continuous. John was writing a book. A book was, so we take the same past tense of the verb to be, but to indicate that it is progressive, it's continuous, we still have to include the being and then the verb in the past participle, which is written. A book was being written by John. I hope this list or this chart helps you to change from active to the passive voice. And remember, as I mentioned before, the tenses go on. Okay, so the same tenses that you have in the past in the active voice, you can also change them to the passive voice. Okay, so I hope this helped you, and I will see you on the next one, guys. Bye bye. Thank you very much.